is the Pegasus Podcast, presented by Night Sports Now. UCF news, views, and a few hot takes. Now, here are your hosts, Bailey Go Knights Adams and Christian Charge On Simmons.
Welcome into episode 263. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCASimmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. You can also email us at PegasusPodcast@ksn@gmail.com. Christian, long time no see.
Yeah, man. Haven't seen you in hours at this point. 36 hours?
What would it be? 30, about 36, almost. Yeah. Great. Awesome. We had the conversation on Saturday. So I was in Orlando. We went to the spring practice that was open to the public on Saturday morning. And obviously during the practice, you and I were kind of talking just about what we were watching, what we were seeing. Talked a little bit afterwards, but then I had said before we went, we're going to be able to plan out our entire podcast 2 days in advance, and we don't ever really do that. Then we got back to your place after and just didn't do it. So once again, these are kind of fresh thoughts, which is probably good. So that's what we're going to do.
Podcast, fresh thoughts.
Fresh thoughts. So yeah, we'll talk about this Saturday's open practice. I keep wanting to say scrimmage still. They did some scrimmaging, a little bit, 11 on 11. But we'll talk that. Yeah. Then we'll talk a little bit about UCF men's basketball and their run in the crown. But first, the open practice on Saturday. First, thoughts on the crowd, because we both were way off. I was more off because your estimation, I think, before we went was 3,000, and I was 5,000.
My estimate was 2,000, and
that's true.
It's not. It was 3,000, but we're lowering it.
Yeah.
I said 2 to 3 on the podcast last week, so I think we'll stick with that. I think in reality it was 400, and I think
I can't do that.
Okay, well, it was 400, and I think the majority of that was recruits and also family of current team members. I think it was probably us and 100 fans was the vibe, which I get because it's a practice. I think one thing that I didn't think about when I was comparing it to the 2021 open practices where they were getting 2,000 or 3,000, which is where I pulled that number, was COVID was still newer then, and I think that was still in the phase where not everyone was outside all the time. So I think people were oh my god, an excuse to leave my home, which might have played a role in that a little bit. But it was honestly, you said on our last podcast that this was going to be for the sickos, and it was so for the sickos. It was honestly really fun to just be able to watch a UCF practice. And we talked about what they would or wouldn't show. They just straight up ran a practice. I don't think they did anything differently because there were people in the stands, and it was as informative as one practice can be, but it was just fun to be out there. And we had our little binoculars, taking our notes, acting like we're scouts when in reality we are just podcasters who know nothing. But it was a fun day, fun morning.
When you were doing your estimate of the crowd, I know we weren't really talking media. Did we take into account the 9 members of the Suns crew that was there?
Trilco's troops.
Yeah.
the Sons of UCF Army. Yeah. I think it's good. Pretty cool. I kind of think of it like Thanos collecting the Infinity Stones. It's Sons of UCF will not rest until the entire media scene is just wearing those Sons of UCF polos.
Yeah, I think that's going to have to be the case. But yeah, we'll of course start this conversation as we do, I think, with almost every football conversation, with the quarterbacks. Which, again, this was one practice, and I think what we're about to say. No, I think we'll start with the idea that the conclusion that we kind of came to, where it's I think the order of how each of these quarterbacks is performing on a given day probably changes by the day. And Scott Frost's comments after practice kind of, I think, confirmed that, where he was no one has separated. But on the day, Ja'Cory Brown had the best day, which flies in the face of, I think, everything we had been hearing.
I've literally heard that he's been the worst one. So that's cool. It is funny because you and I remember we were walking out and we both said that our main takeaway on the quarterbacks was just there's no differentiation. It looks like all 4 are just, hard to tell the difference between them. And then Frost in his postgame literally goes, yeah, the biggest thing is we're waiting for one of the quarterbacks to differentiate themselves. So kind of funny that's how things went.
Yeah, I think in the early individual periods, Ja'Cory looked about as bad as advertised. But then once they went to 11 on 11s, he was about the only one that could do anything. He was leading.
It was interesting. Drives. It wasn't even necessarily I wouldn't even have called him even during 11v11. He wasn't play in, play out consistent. He was just the only one who really made any plays, it felt like. Cam had one really nice run, but that was kind of it. I think we agreed on our ranking was Ja'Cory, Cam, Taven, big drop, Risk. Risk had a really rough day. which I know people were tweeting about and everything afterwards. And that doesn't, I don't know. I mean, we already kind of talked about it. Felt like Risk was not, we weren't really hearing the things out of camp that we were expecting to hear about him anyway. But I don't know. I don't want to overly, it's one practice. I'm sure there's been practices where he's looked great. That kind of seemed to be the vibe and the takeaway of the quarterbacks is there's a lot of back and forth, whatever. But yeah, rough day for Risk.
Yeah, I think some of the highlights during those 11-on-11s. Jakari threw a nice pass to Carl Jenkins for a decent gain. Dylan Wade caught a touchdown from him in traffic. Throw was a little bit behind him, but it was a touchdown over the middle in the red zone. Like you mentioned, the Cam Fancher run, which we saw a lot more movement from Cam Fancher than you and I both kept saying. Like his rushing stats at FAU were basically nothing like to really talk about. But he was moving around and leaving the pocket a lot, and that was partly because I think he was kind of working with a different offensive line, and maybe it was out of necessity. But he showed that he was capable of doing it, which I wasn't really expecting.
Well, to say he had like 300 rushing yards last year. Like he did not rush. It just, he didn't, I mean, he looked, I don't know how else to describe it other than he looked like a quarterback that Gus would have fallen in love with, because it did seem like every play he was just scrambling as soon as there was an opportunity to scramble. But I think the most interesting one to me was Taven, because we've kind of been, well, not kind of, I have fully been operating under the assumption that he will be the starter come the start of the season, and I still believe that will be the case unless something crazy happens. I'm telling you, if no one differentiates themselves, it's going to be Taven. And he was just so, is like vanilla a good word? It just felt like there wasn't anything horrible. There wasn't anything great, but he definitely wasn't making plays. It was kind of a weird thing where it seems like he just has a little, like, his touch on the ball was just kind of off. There were like 2 or 3 big play opportunities that he just kind of didn't get the ball where it needed to go. And he had a pick. I don't know. It was interesting. I wasn't wowed. I wasn't devastated. He just kind of existed. And I feel like we're moving into the worst case scenario if you're the staff, right? Because if not, what do you do if none of the 4 ever, like that day, they all looked largely interchangeable. And that's weird to be in a situation where you have 4 quarterbacks on your team who all look largely interchangeable. And I know we're overreacting to one practice. I know they've been practicing all spring. They'll do workouts.
That's the point of this episode.
This fall, but to overreact to one practice, exactly right. But I don't know. That's how you get set up. Because honestly, the truth is, we've talked about this a million times. The way players are in practice and the way they are in the game is not always the same thing. I think there are guys who we don't know necessarily who. I think there are guys among those 4 who might elevate when they're on the field for a real game. I think there are guys who might fall off a little bit. I don't know. And it's just, how do you figure that out in a practice? You just kind of can't.
Yeah, it's hard to do that. And I guess, I mean, it's not quite the same as it was maybe last year when they were playing New Hampshire, but I mean, having a game against Jacksonville State and then North Carolina A&T, like I think Jacksonville State's a little bit, obviously they're tougher than some of the other teams UCF's been opening with recently, but having that A&T game and kind of having, I guess, those 2 weeks and then a bye week to hopefully get that answer of like, all right, who is going to be somebody who can differentiate themselves under the lights and when we're actually in a game setting, maybe that'll help. But yeah, I mean, with Taven, it was weird. Like we were talking about on Saturday, like he was just putting too much touch on almost every pass where like he had one where he threw it, I think it was to Day, and Day had got really good separation, and he was just put too much air under it, allowed the DB to recover and break up the pass. He threw one to Carl Jenkins later that he completed, but there was just way too much air under it. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Just to me, like that was the kind of the consistent problem with him on a lot of his throws.
We were kind of joking because it felt like every throw Taven made, whether it was just in warm-ups or when he was an 11v11, was just sort of lofting the ball and putting a lot of air on it. And then every throw Jakari made was like, it's like his life depends on that ball hitting the fastest mile per hour possible. And that was just consistent for both of them on opposite ends of the spectrum the entire day. And Dylan Risk, I don't know. It was hard to tell because most of his balls went to the other team, or the other, the defense. But
yeah,
I don't know. It was very weird and I know we, surprise. I'm not going to say we learned nothing about the quarterbacks because we learned a lot, but it was sort of disconcerting to come away and just be like, yeah, I have no idea who the best of the 4 is. Literally not a clue, which I guess is why we've heard so much contradictory stuff through spring. And it's not like they're hiding it. Frost said it in his access after the game. They don't know yet. No one's that's all you want as a coach is you want someone. You don't want it to get to it's the first game of the season and you just have to sit there and go, all right, well, I don't know. We paid Taven the most, so I guess it'll be him, or, he just had a good practice. You want someone to take the job. You want someone to not just stand out, but do something that makes you go, well, he has to be the starter. Like he's earned that. And there's plenty of time for that to happen. It's just clear it's not happening yet.
I would say, is it overreacting to one practice to say, like, I don't think anyone is going to take the job like in spring. Like I just don't see anyone coming out of this spring because there's not that many practices left. They're like already halfway through spring, and I just don't think anyone's going to have like a super clear lead, like in a insurmountable lead in this race going into the summer.
Well, going into summer, no, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone steps up in fall camp because
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying by the end of no one differentiating by the end of spring.
Well, no, I don't think. Yeah. I believe we were in agreement on that no one's going to differentiate in the next week and a half. But I don't know. It's interesting for fall because I do think that. I mean, the vibe of practice was very relaxed. Is that fair to say?
I think so.
Music was going through the whole time. Guys were very loose. Didn't see anything like some of the stuff we'd see under Gus, like players being told to do push-ups. We saw one player get yelled at, and I don't know if we want to, maybe just not on the podcast, be like, here's the players who got disciplined. We don't know who he is anyway. He was wearing a number that's not on the roster.
Yeah.
But it was very, very relaxed, and like the quarterbacks are very loose. And I don't know. I think that everyone on those four quarterbacks understand that a starter is not being named this spring. I think they all understand that this spring there's not necessarily like, I don't think there's anything any of them can do where Frost is going to go, we're not, we're going to know who the guy is. So I think things will kick into high gear in fall. I mean, I think, and Frost, they've all said this is the spring's about learning. I mean, this is a new staff. They're installing a new offense. I think that's taken a front seat to, this is a real gritty competition where we're going to see who's going to take the job. And that's where I feel like that's what you're going to see more in fall is that's when it's going to be time to really see who's going to step up when that job is legitimately on the line.
Yeah, and I think something else you and I have talked about on the podcast, we talked about it on Saturday, is like it probably – I don't know if you could say it's a good thing that no one will differentiate by spring, but I think all four of them still being quote-unquote in it coming out of spring is probably good as far as like keeping them from hitting the portal because you don't want to have to go out and get another body.
Yeah.
You want to keep this group together.
Counterpoint to that, because I do think you're right. I do just want to again clarify we are going off of one practice, and there has been a lot of chatter about some quarterbacks looking better than others, and I didn't see that and go, well, since they all looked even in front of me, no one's leaving. I feel like there's still a very high chance that there's an exit in that room, but I don't know. That would be unfortunate because they would literally then have to go get a quarterback. You can't have 3 scholarship quarterbacks. But I don't know. I wish we could come away and have said, someone did something insane, and now we know they'll be the starter. But and I think the truth is, and this shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, and I don't think this is going to age poorly to say, I don't think any of them are just going to be a star or anything close to that. I think the best you can hope for the quarterback room this year is just someone who can be a reliable starter and not lose them games. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a case to be made that any of those 4 could turn into that.
I think so. And I think that actually is probably a good way to segue into talking about the receivers, because that was one of the bigger takeaways for me is that like I was impressed by several receivers. And again, it's one practice, but it was kind of funny to go into it and be like, none of the quarterbacks really stood out, but a lot of these receivers look good. Like obviously it's kind of some give and take there with quarterback receiver, but I think there were like I think Bradell was probably maybe the most consistent of the receivers throughout the day, but I thought Day Farmer looked good. Wade and Charles had some good plays. Carl Jenkins again caught one from Taven at one point. Tight end Dylan Wade looked like he pulled up at one point and then was like right back in, and he caught that touchdown that I mentioned from Jakari. And so I don't know. I came away with the overreaction of, all right, I'm not as scared as I was. I think there's some talent there to work with. Yeah, and it's like I'm going to have to repeat it with the disclaimer every time I say anything apparently in this episode. It was one practice. We don't know. But, yeah, I think that I'd agree with that generally. It wasn't like, oh, my God, these guys can't catch. They can't run routes. This is terrible. Mm-hmm. It's just so hard from a practice because you're playing against yourself. And like we said, the vibe was very loose. I think you came away a little more positive than I did on the receivers, but we definitely saw some nice stuff, and we saw it from enough different guys where I'm like, okay, like I'd be more worried if like we'd gone out there and I don't know, like DJ Black is the only one who does anything and everyone else is just covered and it's terrible. And we didn't see that. So hopefully they have some pieces there. I like how young the wide receiver room is. Although sometimes I say things like that on this podcast and I think about the portal and I'm like, does that matter anymore? Like it used to be like you really liked when like a sophomore was really good because you're like, yeah, that matters. I don't know if that means literally anything. I think it almost is maybe for UCF is bad now. Maybe. Because they're going to have to either commit a lot of NIL like to retain the player, or they're going to just lose the player. Like if it's a young guy and he gets an offer like, like Randy Pittman gets or whatever it is, like, yeah, I think that might not be a good thing anymore, unfortunately.
I don't know. It's all just a season to season now. I mean, it literally used to be, and that's why coaches had longer leashes back in the day too, because like you'd hire a coach and it would be like, all right, what's your 4-year plan? Like when these guys are seniors, where will the team be? And now it's literally just you have to figure it out year to year.
What and I'd be good for is recruiting.
Go on.
I think like if you young guys are playing early and being successful, you can say like, look, we've got all these young guys playing. You can come in and play. I don't know if it's going to be the same as like in the past where if a player sees a young guy and he's like, oh, I don't know, there's no spot, there's no path to playing because there's this freshman receiver who looked really good because that kid could be gone a day later. So I don't know. I think we're still navigating this, even though it's like 4 or 5 years into all this, but. And
it's about to completely change again, assuming the House settlement is approved.
I'm real sick of this, honestly.
It's never going to stop. Sorry. This is literally just what it's always going to be. And the thing about that is, like, not to get overly philosophical out of nowhere, but college football has never, like, I feel like we act like sometimes I'm like, I miss when college football was normal. This sport has never stayed the same for more than like 5 years. Like, it is just constant change and always.
I would take 1 year at this point.
Yeah, well, this era, I think it's the roster movement that people are fed up with because it's not so much that it's happening. It's just like there is no set of rules. Like it's just all like we can't keep doing the whole every single player is a free agent every offseason. And honestly, if you want to be mad at someone about that, be mad at the NCAA that will just not admit that these players are employees. Because if they admitted they were employees, there could be collective bargaining and it could be like the NBA and NFL where there's caps and contracts and all that. But the NCAA, for some reason, still actually seriously grabs a microphone and says this thing. That's a multi-billion-dollar industry. They're just kids having fun.
Yeah.
So, sorry, can't do it. But yeah, I do think I am curious because you talked about, I mean, Frost has been open about how his strategy on how they distribute their money is going to be different and how their NIL money and their rev share money, he's been open about it's more about retaining guys. So when we say maybe it will be different under Frost, maybe we will see fewer guys hitting the portal. And if rev share works as it's meant to work, which like it won't because nothing ever has in college football, the idea is that teams won't be like, right now there's no kind of cap. So Alabama can just decide we really need Burdell Richardson. So we're going to give him more money than UCF could ever imagine to get him here. Like there will come a time with rev share if it works the way it's supposed to, where there will be teams that have more money than UCF, but they're not going to be able to just triple whatever UCF's paying. It will be more marginal. And we have seen time and time again, both for UCF and for programs all over the country, that guys often don't really want to leave their schools. It's not like the transfer portal rules expose that players secretly hate where they're at and all want to be somewhere else. It's just, you get a number thrown at you that's so huge. It's like, how can you say no to that? Even where you like where you are? Like, I wouldn't say no. I mean, we've said it before on this podcast. You offer me, you double my non-existent salary on this podcast. You go another one, I'll do it. What the hell? But I think rev share will cut that off a little bit because teams are going to be not on an even playing field, but on a more even playing field, if that makes sense. It's not, it can't just be these ballooned inflated numbers beyond what you're offering. Everyone's going to be on a smaller range. So
I don't know. The table money comes back.
But isn't that going to be comforting in a way when it's back
when it's just the same as it always was before?
How it worked for was it Ed Oliver? Not Ed Oliver. Derek King. It was one of the Houston players. It was Derek King who told the story about back when we had good old fashioned cheating in college football. That he was at some like watching a high school basketball game or something, and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to go get a bottle of water." And a Houston booster was watching the game with him. Was like, "Oh, I'll pay for it," and handed him like $400 cash. Like that's what we need to get back to. Like that's what college
McDonald's bags or whatever it was.
Like the Tennessee. So this always has bothered me about the Tennessee thing because one, that ended up not being true, but I believe. But two, even when people thought it was true, I'm pretty sure it was a Chick-fil-A bag, and then somehow it got turned into a McDonald's bag on Twitter, and now the meme is McDonald's bag.
I don't know.
We got to get back. Let's get back to cheating. Wouldn't you like that more? Like if we went and we had the rev share, right? We do rev share, and everyone, I would love this so much if we could all just agree as a society that we're going to do rev share, and the teams that cheated before will just go back to doing that, and let's just do that again. I'd be fine with that.
Everybody was fine with it before, pretty much.
The issue is here's what changed in college football. I'll tell you what changed in college football is back in the day, Nick Saban could be like, "Would you like a quarter pounder with a side of $4,000?" And the player would go, "Yes." And that would be that. The problem is now what's happened the last few years, like a school will go, "We're going to give you $50,000. And the NCAA will go, "Hey, we just caught you doing that. You can't give them $50,000. And the school will go, "I really don't care what you think. We gave him $50,000. Sorry. And there's no consequences or repercussions in any way, shape, or form. That's kind of where we're at right now. But I don't know.
Yeah.
This was all a very long-winded way to say that, yeah, I think the wide receivers look good, even though they're young, and I'm worried about them transferring out one day. But I don't know. Maybe that will be different under Frost in the Rev Shur era, and we can go back to be excited about young guys looking good.
Nick Saban's going to come knocking on your door for making that joke because remember when, I don't know, was Shane Gillis insinuated that they were paying players and cheating? He got so mad. So, yeah, expect a knock on your door.
I would love to know, because one of the most we need to stop. We need to go back to talking about UCF. You're not here for it. But just really quickly, one of the things I'd love to know is how rampant the cheating really was pre-NIL, because I feel like people have wildly varying opinions. I don't think some people acted like the SEC was just straight up salarying their team basically and paying them all of this money. I don't think it was ever like that. I think it was stuff like the Derek King thing. You get some cash slipped to you here and there, and I don't know.
Cars and stuff, probably. I think that was a real thing.
Well, that was SMU. That was what SMU got killed for, right? Was they were giving very nice cars to players.
Yeah, and Florida State getting free shoes, according to Steve Spurrier.
Well, look at Ohio State lost. Ohio State lost one of their best coaches over what was it? Free tattoos? Was that what it was?
Something
a tattoo
that,
shop was giving them free tattoos. What a quaint scandal! That's crazy to think about.
Yeah. Next thing I kind of want to talk about was, and I think this is where we get into the whole watching practice and seeing bad on one side means good on the other side. I came away also thinking there's some talent on this defense and some playmaking ability that I think we thought was there, but it was just nice to see it. Philip Dunham, who has been talked a lot about as one of the standouts throughout spring, had an interception on Dylan Risk at one point. We saw an interception from Bellamy. We saw an interception from Andrew Harris, and also what would have been a sack on a blitz up the middle from Harris. And also Andrew Harris looked gigantic.
Looked large, yeah. And the other thing to say, he had an interception, he had a pick six.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a pick six where he just had a clear lane. He was juking guys downfield to make that happen. It was really, probably the most impressive play of the day. And that one really excited me. I think I said to you when we were there, I said, my ideal scenario is Andrew Harris beats out all of these transfer linebackers. And I don't mean that as I hate transfers or I want them to fail. I just mean I think that if that happens, that really implies that Andrew Harris has taken that leap. Because the idea when they brought him in was they understood he was a project. He was, I think he was newer to playing football even. And the idea was that all the talent is there and it's just about developing it. And this year 3, come on in and just start and be real. I think he can be a potentially really good player for them, and that's super exciting. Yeah,
and I hope that's the case. And it was just kind of good to see, because I think we saw the play happen, and then I just saw the number, and we were like, all right, because we didn't have all the numbers down, obviously. We looked down, and I was like, that was Andrew Harris. And it was just kind of a little different than it would have been reaction-wise if it would have just been some anybody else.
Right.
Because I don't know, we've been talking about him for a couple of years, like you said, even during his recruitment, we were talking about what a big deal it would be to land him. And yeah, if that development is starting to pay off, that would be very, very exciting to see. But yeah, Jaden Bellamy, the interception, I think just kind of seeing some guys make plays. I don't know, this defense, I feel for the past few years has not gotten its hand on a lot of interceptions, not created a lot of turnovers, and have really just stayed on the field for a lot of the game. So it'd be nice to see that not be the case under Alex Grinch.
Yeah, it's so funny because as you were saying that, I was like, yeah, but Alex Grinch is still the DC. Am I just going to ride that take forever? Until I've seen them actually be good at defense, I'm just going to add the caveat that Alex Grinch is the DC. Probably.
It was what we did last year with Ted Roof, but we just were proven right. I think the hope this time is that
lasting a season is crazy, man.
The hope this time, and it's not even he didn't last a season because Gus left. It's he didn't even get in. It was just that was it. He was gone. What was it? 9 games?
8 games.
But yeah, we were proven right. But I hope this time around, our whole but Alex Grinch, I hope that ends up being proven wrong. It'd be nice to be wrong.
Yeah, no, and maybe we will be. I don't know. We'll see. The thing, and not to just rehash the same conversation 90 times, but the thing with Alex Grinch was it's not we didn't do the simple casual thing if we just said, we looked at the defenses he coached and they allowed a lot of points, so he sucks. It's it was a running gag in college football what a terrible DC he was, with other coaches saying, yeah, he's not good at X's and O's, at keeping his players disciplined. So it was a super, super risky hire.
And I feel they
probably didn't need to make, but we'll see.
Frost, Frost had it, I guess, very briefly with the Rams, but Frost didn't really have that road back that most coaches have, even Lane Kiffin had at a certain point, where you go and you're an analyst somewhere or you're a coordinator again somewhere. I guess Grinch wasn't a head coach, but he went from fired defensive coordinator who everyone. Did he go back? Where was he? Oh, he was at Nebraska.
Yeah, he was at Wisconsin. He was co-DC at Wisconsin this past year.
But
he was not calling plays. He was coaching the safeties.
Yeah, it was 1 year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I don't know. I still don't buy that. Wasn't like it's like, oh, like it's been enough time. Let's give him a shot.
I do not think anyone would have guessed that he would take a year and then be full acting DC again for a Power 4 school. That was not a path that I think he would have guessed for himself or anyone would have.
We'll see how it goes. But I don't know. The next topic I had on here was the young talent, which we kind of touched on already, I guess, with the receivers, but and on defense. But the other one I kind of wanted to talk about here, and it was weird because he was wearing a no-contact jersey, but still practicing, and it was Tavion Swint, obviously an early enrollee. And I was just kind of taken aback by he doesn't look like a freshman who should still be in high school right now.
Nope.
He looked like his legs. He's got legs like he's been in their weight room for 3 years already, and his arms are cut up. Like I looked at him and I was like, that's Tavion Swint, and that's exciting. I mean, we didn't really get to do a lot, at least in 11-on-11s with the no contact and stuff, but that was cool.
Large guy, big guy.
Big guy.
Excited about that because I'm excited to see that he's large. But I really we were talking about this a little bit when we were out there. Is Tavion is when you rank? We've been talking about how there's just not really a face of UCF football right now, player wise, because obviously Scott Frost is the face, but the coach is always the face. I think Paul Rubel is probably face number one right now. And if that has not changed by the end of the season, then, oh, good Lord, it's going to be a rough year. And that's no disrespect on Paul Rubel. It's just typically the right tackle is not the face of your program. But I do think Tavion's one of those guys who the way he came into the team really captured the fan base's attention because you think about his journey. He committed to UCF 18 years ago. It was 1 billion years ago that this guy committed. And which I remember we joked on the podcast after he committed because he was a very highly rated commit, big deal for UCF to get him, and everyone was doing their reactions. And I was just kind of like, okay, when he signs in 2 years, which isn't going to happen, we'll talk about it. Because also at the time Florida State was still super on him. I was like, he's so going to flip. Not only does he not flip and stay with his UCF commitment for way longer than a guy who's usually committed to one school, never really entertains anything. And then Gus leaves. Not only leaves, but leaves to go to Florida State, the other school that really badly wanted Tavion at one point. And Tavion pens a letter just going, I really just want to go to UCF. That's really all he wanted. And came here without a coach, and then he gets Frost. And I don't know. That's a story that I really hope he pans out, and I really hope he pans out fast because that is the type of story that fans just gravitate to. And that can make him a really popular player. And it would be so cool to see him live up to the hype.
And didn't even really have his running backs coach at the time. Obviously with Frost, there was no telling what the future of the position coaches was going to be. So he was just that sold on UCF and wanting to come to UCF. So yeah, I think I might have posted it when he posted that letter, and I just said he's an instant fan favorite. Yep. And we don't even know if he's going to play a lot this year or not, but hopefully he does. And I think even a little bit again for this practice on Saturday. With him not practicing 11-on-11s, we saw a lot more of Stacey Gage, which was another one who I thought looked pretty impressive and had some good burst and had found some lanes here and there, and that was nice to see as well. Another guy we talked about for a long time, and I think that's just kind of where I came away with you don't get to see because the practice the view of practice, or I guess what we get out of practice on a normal basis isn't much. This was a chance to actually see some of these guys that we haven't been able to see on Saturdays in the last couple seasons. Guys that we talked about throughout their whole recruiting process who, obviously never saw the field under Gus, so we didn't really know where they were at. And not that we know now, but we actually get to see them play football with our own eyes, for the first time in a lot of cases.
Which is very cool. I mean, it's so funny because it always, until you actually go out there and see some of these guys, it feels very hypothetical. You just sort of talk about it. And like I said, I'm really happy about this being a thing that occurred because it was such a harmless idea from UCF's part. And it was just kind of cool to see them embrace something like that where, there isn't a downside to this. There isn't some big threat like Gus always kind of made it out of. I don't think UNC had spies hidden among the fans and they're going to learn all this stuff. Because you know what? It's a freaking spring practice. It's how can you come away as an enemy of UCF athletics trying to spy on things? How can you come away knowing anything when they don't know anything yet? They're still learning who everybody is and where they're going to go and what's going to happen. And they're installing the offense and the defense. And it's just And yeah, not a lot of fans took the opportunity. I'm assuming this won't be back next year since it was like us and 4 other people. But I don't know. It was a nice opportunity if you are a sicko and really love this team and just want to see what's going on. Just get out there on a Saturday, hang out in the bounce house, watch a practice, feel good about the way things are going, and that's kind of it.
There's another one on Friday. You're going, right?
I am going to the one on Friday.
I will not be making the trip back for this one, but yeah.
Cool. Hey, if you're listening, how are you spending your Friday night? Going out, having some drinks, having a good time? I'll be watching UCF practice, and I would not have it any other way.
The last thing I wanted to briefly touch on was kind of not what we saw out of the O-line, but more like who was where. And sure. the big caveat being I don't really know where guard Memolar was. It was weird. I could not find him with my binoculars, but again, he could have been out there and I just didn't see him. But for the most part, what we were seeing with the O-line was Rubelt at tackle, Keegan Smith in at guard, Carter Miller at center, Jabari Brooks at guard, and Preston Cushman at the other tackle spot. But I think what's going to be the case, as it typically is they'll keep shuffling until they find what works. And I don't think you really find what works necessarily in the spring. So it's just kind of how it was for that day, but it could be different on Friday by the time you get out there.
Yeah, I'll be curious. That'll be something to keep an eye on, which I'll be bad at because you were more the one keeping an eye on that. I just kept saying to you, tell me who's at right tackle. And you're like, okay. But yeah, it's that. Oh, it just feels too early to evaluate. I feel like we could BS you guys and talk about it for 10 minutes, but that's one that's going to come together later. But
yeah.
Paul Rubelt's a tall man. I know that's not a breaking news to anybody, but it's always
considering
weird.
He's been here for 5 years now.
Yeah, I think it's going to be season number 5 for him. So yeah, overlaps with Mackenzie Milton.
That's so crazy. Now Mackenzie Milton is one of his coaches.
Which, another thing, if we're getting mean, well, this isn't mean at all because he's the best player in school history. So nothing we could say could hurt him anyway. It's Milton standing next to the quarterbacks makes me confused how he's the best player in school history. Like I that sounds so mean, but like we knew Milton was small when he played here, and it was even kind of like a running joke. But like and it's also they have some larger quarterbacks right now, but he looks like a coach. Like it's going to be one of those things where it's like I feel like in 20 years, because I expect he's going to be a successful coach, just given that he was kind of getting in on that track his last few years of college and already is very young to have worked his way up to a positions coach for a Power 4 team already. And if UCF has success, he will continue to rise. And he's going to be one of those guys where, like, 20 years from now when he's a head coach somewhere and players will look at him and be like, oh, did you played college ball? And he'll be like, yeah, I finished 6th in the Heisman voting. And they'll be like, what the hell?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And also, I guess one last thing about the whole day or the morning out there was it was cool seeing Gabe Davis and Daryl Mack out there.
Very cool.
That was very cool. And seeing them kind of catch up with Scott Frost, catch up with Mackenzie Milton, just felt like it was nice. Like it was like a throwback to the good old days, which really I think is longer ago than I think I ever really realized.
It's very cool how we're here because it's all feel good and seeing guys you liked. And until they play a game, we can just keep pretending nothing bad is going to happen. And I think this is a beautiful time we're in for these next few months.
Yeah. And you and I kept saying, like, I still think like this year is just going to be the 2016. It's going to be so hard to like train ourselves to not think that way. Like it's just going to be another setup season. And
Ross was comparing it to 2016. He was telling stories of 2016 spring practice and the parallels. I mean, and it's funny that the team's even shaping up similarly, that the offense looks like the younger, more shaky unit and the defense looks like it might really be something. Like we literally might just watch 2016 again.
Which I'd be fine with. That was, it was a good foundational year.
We're going to swap the Cure Bowl for the Gasparilla Bowl, and that'll be that.
If they make a bowl game, I will be
thrilled.
Yeah.
Surely the general fan base is in that boat, right? Like surely the general fan base, if they went 6
God, I hope
that would be an acceptable result for this upcoming season.
I hope so, but there's some overlap with probably some of the people we might talk about here in this next segment. And
do you know what helps it though? You know what helps them is Gus Malzahn when he was I love when a coach leaves, and I always end up. I did this with Hypel too. As you guys know, if you listen to the podcast, I was late to being out on Gus. I stuck on the Gus bus longer than most, and then finally it got to the point where it was like, guys, this is not tenable and must end. But then the coach leaves, and then for the next 2 to 3 months in particular, I'm just like, I think I hate everything they did here, and I'm kind of in that phase right now. But Gus did this thing that infuriated me when he was here, and we had topics on the podcast where he spent 4 seasons at UCF, and at any point in those 48 months he was here, you could put a mic in front of him and say, what do you think about the team the next time they play a game? And he'd go, we've got a real team. They're great. I think they can win anything. And fans would be like, oh my God, the coach thinks we can win anything. we're going to be amazing this year. And then they go play and it's like, they can't score points. And I think maybe the fan base will be more tempered when Scott Frost does his media avail and the media are like, hey, how'd practice look? And he goes, they sucked. Like, they need to be better. And I don't know, Frost has seemed pretty honest, and I think that he will. It's weird. He's different than he was not like this when he was here in 2016 to 2017. So it's an adjustment for all of us. I think he'll probably quiet down a little more once the season gets closer and once they have secrets to keep secret. But for now, he's being very honest and telling the fans, hey, this team needs work. They are not where we want them to be. They need to do better. And I think that message, Gus's message of we will beat anyone every year all the time trickled down to the fan base, and maybe Frost's will too.
Yeah. And I think, he's kind of hammered home, like, we got a long way to go, which I would expect. Like, I would expect that to be the case. It would be bizarre if that wasn't the case, but
the other thing I said to you when we were out there that I want to repeat on the podcast so it's on the record, because I think it's a point that we should hammer into our listeners' brains until they can't forget it, is I don't want to refer this as year one of Frost anymore. I want to call it year zero, because they signed them into a contract after signing day. There was this is the most slapped together with duct tape roster ever. And it's just like there's nothing that can happen this season, good or bad, is going to really influence how I feel about the Frost era and how it's going to play out as a whole, because it's just like, what were you supposed to do?
Yeah. Which is why I think like having expectations at that level gives this such a potential to be a really fun, like unexpectedly fun season, because like if they do overperform just even slightly, it's like, wow, that was a lot of fun. Like it was way better than we were expecting. But
we have to watch ourselves, because when I say year zero, I truly mean that in both directions. If UCF very unexpected, like say they randomly have an Arizona State type season, they out of nowhere go 9-3, 7-2, play for the Big 12 title. I'm not here going, wow, the sky really is the limit under Frost. It's just like, dang, they got really lucky that this worked out the way it did. Now let's see if they can build on that momentum. That's all that's going to mean.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. We can move on now if you don't have anything else to say.
Yeah, I think that it was very hot. I don't know what the hell's going on where it's early April and it feels like summer. We're having thunderstorms and it's 90 degrees outside. This is ridiculous.
That is, I'm finding myself hating it a lot. Just walking to my car and then getting in my hot car and starting to just drip sweat immediately. It's not my favorite thing, but you'd think I'd be used to it by now, having lived in Florida my whole life, as you have, but still hate it. Really don't like
the only thing keeping me in the state is UCF. I hate the weather here so much. Only other thing I wanted to say was that we ate at Burger U after. And I don't know why I said that in a voice. We're not sponsored by Burger U. I don't know anything about Burger U, but we did eat there a lot in college, and it feels like they've upped their game. Good food. It was tasty.
It was good burger. Yeah, it was better than I remembered. And it was never bad before or anything, but like it could have been the fact that we were out in the sun and very hungry, but it was also just I don't know, it's better than I remembered it being.
I'm a big burger guy. Like very big burger guy, and I'm a big stickler on burgers. It's like I don't like most burgers I eat. It's like I'm always chasing the high of like that one really good burger, and that was a good burger. It was very tasty.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I'm sick of these stupid like I'm sick of these flat crispy patties that are in right now. Like I'm so sick of when I get a hamburger. So is that like a smash burger? I'm so freaking sick of like I'd like one cheeseburger, please, and they go thanks. We have a piece of paper that we burnt. I don't understand how people like that. Anyway, we can move on.
We can move on to really kind of just what the rest of our weekend looked like after the practice on Saturday, which ended up being watching UCF basketball beat Villanova in overtime in the semis of the Crown. And then obviously we went our separate ways on Sunday morning, but both separately watched UCF lose to Nebraska in the final, unfortunately. So the season came to an end in the finals of the Crown, but ended up being, I don't know, I think at the beginning of the Crown, we were like, it'd be just fun if they just put together a run. Like I wasn't really expecting it, but I was like, at least hopefully maybe they win one game. But then they kind of did the thing where it's like once they won one game and got matched up with Cincinnati, I was like, oh, I can't like lose to Cincinnati to end the season. And then from there, it was like they're in the semis. Like it's only a couple wins away from winning the whole thing. But yeah, they fall one win short. The game ended on just, I think, one of the worst notes, especially after watching that Duke-Houston game on Saturday. It was like fresh in your mind, but they come out of halftime and are up, 14 at one point, I think?
Yeah.
And then
14.
I don't know if you have the number, but Nebraska finished the game on like a 32 to 10, some sort of run
brutal.
like that.
It was pretty brutal.
But yeah, that was
I
sad.
think that maybe this is cope. I feel like they win that game if Darius Johnson was healthy. He did something to his hamstring late in the game the day before, and he was just not right. And he's missing shots. and you're watching him, he's massaging his hamstring as he runs down the court. I just don't think he was. That's
Pick
tough.
Up fouls and stuff, and it's when your hamstring is probably not in the best shape at that point. It's probably a little harder to be able to play defense, and you're probably doing some stuff that you're trying to compensate for things you can't do. And it sucked for it to go out like that.
But even with that in the title game, what a freaking he just upped his legacy so much in that performance. It was kind of funny how, obviously, I'm not going to sit here and be like, Keyshawn Hall is gone and that's good. But like the offense looked the most fun it looked all year when it ran directly through Darius Johnson. Mm-hmm. And him having, 41 points? 42 points
on Saturday.
And that was coming off 31 points in the game before. Like, it was just a stupid run.
Including the game-tying 3 to send it to overtime.
Yeah, the gutsiest 3 you've ever seen. Like, literally just pulled up for no reason and was like, nah, we need to go to overtime, so I'm going to hit this, and did. It was fun. It was a lot better than just not playing in a tournament to end the season. I think it changed the notes of the fan base a little bit just because it was fun. And we kind of talked about that. Not everything needs to mean something. It's kind of like a bowl game. Like, I'm not sitting here and saying I believe the Crown is more as prestigious as the tournament. And I'm glad that but it was just a fun week, basically, of getting to watch UCF play some fun games. Good note to end the season on. Can I talk for a little bit here, or do you have more to say?
No, go for it.
So I want to talk about, this feels like a good, and I've been saving this, and I've said on past podcasts I was going to do it. This feels like a good reflection point, just kind of for UCF men's basketball as a program and how people feel about parts of it. I promise I'm not going to start yelling, guys. I know I have in the past, but I'm working on my emotional regulation.
Are you?
Yeah. I was Bailey's saying, are you, after he watched me have the meltdown of all meltdowns during the Villanova game. That was the angriest I've been during a sporting event in a while. I apologize to Ben.
It made me think, like, do I not care enough? I was like, do I not care enough about this?
So I was watching with you and our friend Sarah, and I was so angry, like the angriest I've been in quite some time about anything. And you guys not being more upset was making me more angry. Like, I felt like a monkey in a zoo because, like, I would get really mad about something. You guys would both be like, look how mad he is. And I'm like, I'm even more mad now. And it was just like this endless cycle of rage. Yeah. I was Benny Williams tipping a made UCF shot out of the basket from underneath it for no reason is quite literally the angriest I think I've ever been at any UCF athletics event in my entire life. And was that an appropriate reaction?
When overtime starts, the color commentator was for the game. It says, how big is that Benny Williams like goaltending now? And I was just like, no, you didn't have to bring it back up. Now Christian's gonna scream again.
I like how I just got over saying that the Crown tournament didn't matter. Like, I don't know why I was so angry. I think I just I don't know. I really don't know why. I was just very upset for that game. But
yeah,
I think that shows how far down football's fallen. That I didn't feel anything close to that for a football game at any point this season. But anyway, this is a good reflection point to just talk about the program and where it's at, because now the season's over. The various camps have either renewed their calls for Dawkins to be fired. A Twitter account that's been right about things before declared that they've heard Dawkins isn't coming back. I don't know for sure, but guys, I'm really going to push back on that being a thing.
Did you see him immediately flip on it too?
No, did he? Okay.
So somebody asked him, someone said, I forgot what the question was, but he was like, I don't know, like things are still being talked about. It wouldn't shock me if he's back. And I'm like, you just said that might have been his last game.
Okay, they must have, because just full disclosure, there has not been a shred of that from the UCF side of things. I do not think that is happening. But the reason I want to talk about this a little bit is because I do believe that in all likelihood next year will be Dawkins' final year. He's going to play in the final. He's going to coach in the final year of a contract, which is very unusual. He's older at this point. I'm not saying this is, I think UCF's hell-bent on firing him. I just think that next year feels like a natural departure point for both sides. And I wanted to address a couple things about the Dawkins situation, and I wanted to try a new approach on this. Instead of yelling at you and calling you dumb, I'm going to try to calmly make some points and just you take your.
You, the listeners, not me, because I will probably agree with this.
Yeah. You know what's extra funny is I'm making eye contact with you through the video as I'm saying this, and I'm not talking to you in any way, shape, or form. I am talking directly to the listeners. But I did put up a poll just about an hour ago because I was curious, because I've had a sneaking suspicion that most of you, I feel like some people on both sides of this are very loud, and it's not where most people are at. And the poll I put up was, how happy are you with Johnny Dawkins as UCF's men's basketball head coach? I put the options as very happy, somewhat unhappy, very unhappy. 7% said very happy. 13% said very unhappy. Everyone else was either somewhat happy or somewhat unhappy. 44% for happy, 36% for unhappy. So what that showed is I think the vast majority of the fan base are just kind of in the middle on this, which is good to see, because I think some people are very loud about it. But I've already seen a lot of the same stuff. People are angry that they didn't go to the tournament. They're angry they didn't win the crown. I just want to talk through some numbers because I really feel like the best way to just explain why things are the way they are and where to direct your attention if you want things to change is just the reality of the situation. So it was a 20-win season. Yes, it was kind of a BS 20-win season because they got there through, wins in a tournament, but it was still nice to see. It was a fun year. And I've been trying to track down as many numbers as I can for where UCF men's basketball is at, and it's hard because stuff is typically private. I will say that one thing we know publicly is that, for example, if you're wondering where their budget is at, Keyshawn All was reported by Matt Murchell was offered $2.5 million to go somewhere else. I think we can assume that place is Auburn since that's where he went. We don't know what the men's basketball NIL budget is. I've never heard a peep of what it is, to be totally honest. We have heard things about what the football budget is, and we've heard varying numbers over the course of the last few months, and those numbers have varied anywhere from $4 million to $8 million is around what was spent on the football team. So if that's what was spent on football, you can bet that a very, very small chunk of that was devoted to basketball, and that will probably continue going forward. And I know that people are sick of the resources talk, but I really can't overstate how much Dawkins has overperformed what this team is supposed to be. And the most recent numbers available, there are actual real numbers out there, which we referenced a long time ago on the podcast, for the actual budget of every men's basketball program in America for the 2022 fiscal year. This was the last full year that UCF was in the AAC, or the most recent numbers. And I know those are outdated numbers at this point, but I want to talk about that as a frame of reference. For 2022 fiscal year, the UCF men's basketball budget was $4.3 million. Now I know you're thinking, hey, I have no frame of reference for any of this, and that means nothing to me, but don't worry, I'm going to give it to you. In 2022, UCF's $4.3 million men's basketball budget placed them 8th of the 11 teams in the AAC at the time. Only USF, Tulane, and East Carolina spent less. Even Tulsa spent more on their basketball program that year than UCF did. And when I say UCF was 8th of 11th, it wasn't even particularly close. Like Wichita spent about $12 million on their team that year. Houston spent about $8 million. Teams you would never imagine in UCF sphere. Like, are you familiar with Grand Canyon?
I am, yes.
Yeah, have you watched a lot of their basketball games?
They were in the tournament this year, right? But no, not really.
I don't think they were. Were they?
I thought they were.
Well, either way, it's good they are because they spend more money on their team than UCF, so that's good. Of the only those four teams, Tulane, East Carolina, USF, and UCF, the only 4 teams that year that were spending under $4.5 million in the AAC, UCF's the only one with a tournament appearance at any point in the last decade. And I was thinking about it a lot, and it's funny because USF is a very similar example to UCF in a lot of ways for men's basketball because they don't invest in their men's basketball program, and they don't invest for the same reason UCF does, is that football is the priority. They know they're a step behind, and they know that's where the money needs to go, and they followed very similar trajectories. And in Dawkins' time at UCF, the time that he has been here, USF has only recorded 2 winning seasons. They've recorded more single-digit win seasons than they have winning seasons. It's just that's what a basketball program with no investment and also they don't have some coach who overperforms looks like, is that year in and year out. And I just think that it's worth considering that when you look at East Carolina, you look at all these programs that have had those issues that don't invest. UCF doesn't invest, and they haven't had nearly those issues. And I think that's something worth considering. And yeah, maybe the time has just come for Dawkins to go next year. Fans want to reset or whatever. And what I want to caution is that I'm not here to tell you need to support Dawkins blindly or you need to want him to stay. What's bothering me more than anything and why I wanted to talk about this is that I do believe his time here is coming to an end. I think there's a good shot next year is the last year. And I'm growing sad to think about how he has done a very good job here and will have spent a decade here as the head coach. And by basically any metric you want to pick, has been the best modern men's basketball coach ever. He's just kind of been attacked by the fan base his entire time here. And I find that very sad. You go back to March of 2019. What happened in March of 2019, Billy? Do you remember?
The tournament.
They went to the tournament. They were an at-large team for the first time ever. They won a tournament game for the first time ever. They came a missed shot away from going to the Sweet 16. All incredibly huge things for this program. That was in March of 2019. In February of 2019, most of the fan base was calling for him to be fired. This has just been the story. And I don't really know what changed because I've been going to UCF men's basketball games my whole life. And even Donnie Jones, that era was not good here, especially the move to the AAC. And everyone knew he was going to get fired because they couldn't even put together a winning season. But it was just kind of apathetic. There wasn't anger. And I don't know if it's because Dawkins raised the stakes that fans then got mad he didn't raise them more or what.
Because football got good.
I really do think it might be because football got good, which is actually insane because those 2 dates 2017 and football happened and then it became, why aren't we making the tournament? Which is crazy, but
it is.
All I'm saying in my final takeaway on this is if you didn't care about this, fine. If I didn't convince you of anything, fine. It's just if you're one of the people who if you're one of the people who's not happy with the men's basketball program and where it is at, that's fine. I'm not happy with where it's at. I don't think one tournament appearance in a decade is great. I'm not a fan of that. I want them to be back in the tournament. I just want you to be ready for that when the coaching change happens. I think Dawkins has held them afloat is the real truth. And I don't know what's going to happen when they don't have a coach who can do that, when they don't have a coach who's willing to stay at a place for 10 years and try to build a program where they're not going to have the resources to compete in the toughest basketball conference in America. The Big 12 has reclaimed that title over the course of the tournament. SEC was proven to be frauds, etc. So next year's probably his last year. Show some appreciation. I understand that not everyone is super into men's basketball, college basketball, whatever, but he did a really good job. Did a really, really good job. And I hope that history will smile upon him, and maybe in a few years, fans can look back and say, hey, this is actually a pretty good era, pretty fun era. It gave some good memories, better memories than really any point in the history of the program. So
I fear that whoever replaces him, things will bottom out, and then only then will people be like, oh, maybe we did have it kind of okay with Dawkins. Like maybe perhaps I was too harsh on you. But I don't know. Hopefully that's not what happens. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think everybody knows where I stand on Dawkins, and I don't really have a lot more to add other than, yes, cleaning up the Grand Canyon thing. They were a 13 this year, a 13 seed. They lost to Maryland in the first round. So I knew I'd seen them in that in the tournament. But anything else before we move on to the news?
Yeah, I thought the crown logo was really cool.
Very cool.
Very cool logo.
I like the crown. Big crown guy.
It was really fun. And I think that they had the perfect tournament because they had a bunch of close games. They got some, I'm curious to see the TV ratings, but they're not bad. Kind of like, I think what Fox has figured out, and this is going to be beneficial for the Big 12 moving forward, is we have 90 billion bowl games in college football, not because we believe that the Bad Boy Mowers Bowl means something or that this is a real huge accomplishment. It's just people like watching sports. And if you from sports to watch it. And Brett Yormark, since he took over the Big 12, has been very big on, he thinks basketball is a very undervalued property. And I think that's why Fox is such a good partner for the Big 12, because I think Fox realizes that too, that hey, the NIT is a little different because it's been around forever. And I hate to say this, it's not like people homer, but it features a lot of teams that no one's ever heard of. And I know that's not right, not fair, whatever, but I think Fox is kind of cracking the code on hey, casual people will, the Final Fours that night, not going to hurt to throw some basketball in their face on the TV to have on in the background earlier in the day. And that's seems like UCF can build up their brands a bit.
I think that helped a lot. I think the placement of games, even the early round games being on the Monday and Tuesday after the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 weekend, where people are like, oh, I wish there was some more basketball right now. Because people, a lot of it sickos, people who just watch basketball for any reason or to bet on basketball, whatever it is, to want to just have a game on. Having that on Monday and Tuesday and throughout the week, and then leading up all day into the Final Four, I think that was just strategically a smart thing. So yeah, I think it'll stick. I think it's here to stay, and it was fun. So we'll see. Football news, real quick, just some commitments to UCF: 2026 wide receiver Ty Wortham, defensive back Jakari Jackson, and tight end Charlie Gillek, I think. They all committed to UCF over the last week or so. We're going to do that recruiting pod that we mentioned, I think, in a couple of weeks. And we'll talk a little bit more about where the recruiting class is right now, kind of the strategy and it being a little puzzling. And yeah, I think we have a lot to say on that. So we'll save it for that podcast. I do also have the mock draft roundup now that the draft is just a few weeks away. Looking at the mock draft database, RJ Harvey is currently a projected 5th rounder. I know when I talked to you on Saturday, he was projected as a 4th rounder. So I guess some more mocks came in that lowered that overall consensus projection, but 129th overall on the consensus board, seeing him in mocks in the 3rd to 5th round range. Both BJ Adams and Mac McWilliams kind of right now projected as undrafted free agents, maybe late day 3 picks, 6th or 7th round, kind of just depends on if a team falls in love with them. And then Kobe Hudson is projected right now as a 7th rounder on average, 215th overall on the consensus board. He's gone in the 5th and 7th round ranges. On those mocks, I think it's obviously a slam dunk that RJ gets drafted, and hopefully at least 2 of those other 3 guys do. But I think it's very clear that all of them will at least latch on as undrafted free agents this coming summer. So see, we'll keep track of that kind of stuff throughout the rest of the month up until draft weekend, which is the last weekend of April. And then game of the week, UCF softball. They've got their they're going back to conference play this weekend. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday will be at BYU. UCF is 23-17-1. They're 4-8 in Big 12 play, tied for 8th in the conference. They're playing at BYU, who is 23-10, 7-5 in the Big 12, which is 3rd in the conference. They've got games Thursday and Friday at 8 o'clock, Saturday at 2 o'clock. Both baseball and softball are getting to the point where it's like if they don't put together some crazy run to end the season at this point, it's going to be a wash of a year.
We didn't include that in our weekend rundown together that we went to the UCF baseball game on Friday.
No, I kind of forgot. I put it out of my mind. For me, the weekend started at the spring practice on Saturday morning. Tweet of the week. Tweet of
the week this week. Now that I've been nice about Dawkins, immediately goes to a tweet that annoyed me about him. You tweeted following the semifinal win. You said Johnny Dawkins remains pound for pound the best coach on our campus, and he is hated for it. A very hot take if you don't know what pound for pound means. You got a reply from Knights ML at Matt UCF Too Strong, who said to you he should have told the other prima donnas to leave earlier in the season. He didn't manage the team well until now, since the only ones that are there are the ones that care. And this is tweet of the week for a couple of reasons. The first is that that's kind of a nonsensical take that I don't fully understand to begin with. I actually seriously don't know what point they're trying to make. But the real reason he got tweet of the week is because they said pre-Madonnas, they put pre-Madonnas, like the singer Madonna. And I can only hope and pray that was a joke from that person. And they have not actually gone their whole life thinking that people are saying, yeah, they're a pre-Madonna.
Maybe a Ted Lasso reference, hopefully.
Hopefully there is a joke in Ted Lasso about a character thinking that. So yeah. I'm hoping with all my heart for you, Knight ML, that is not seriously what you, not only that you thought that, but we're so confident in it that you wrote it out and tweeted it. I'm hopeful that is not what happened to you.
Before Madonna, other singers didn't have to work as hard.
Yeah, it's like 80. I forgot. It's like 80 in BC, but for Madonna.
Yeah, pre-Madonna.
A pre-Madonna.
It's great. There were a lot of tweets you could have, like replies that you could have picked out of my mentions there.
But at least the other ones understood the English language. So well, pre-Madonna is not even English. So that was a terrible thing to say there.
Tweet of the week to you. We'll get out of here now before we show even more that we don't know the English language. But we'll be back next week with episode 264. Until then, you can find us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCA Simmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. Thank you guys so much for being with us. We will talk to you next week.
Bye, everybody.